Hey everybody, welcome to the Paranormal Rush Hour. I'm your host, Ryan Rush, and tonight I want to talk to you guys about something that just really flips me out. Okay, what I'm talking about is missing 411. Okay, now those of you who are not familiar with what that is, all right, there is a series of missing persons cases, and a lot of the time they're I don't know, I guess you could say homicides, maybe. I don't know what they rule them as, honestly. Maybe accidental deaths, whatever. But anyhow, um, the ones they find the bodies for, other ones remain missing people until they determine them, you know, dead because they've been gone for so long. Now, what's interesting about this stuff is that the missing 411 cases, they all share similar profile points. Okay, and we'll get into these. And that's what sets them apart from other missing persons cases and disappearances and abductions and things like that. That's one of the things that sets them apart. Now, these profile points are crucial, and they were discovered by Dave Paulides. Now, David Paulides is a former detective, police officer from I want to say San Diego, maybe uh, Santa Cruz, one of those San somethings in California, and yeah, he's from California, and he he's retired, and then he worked in technology, I think, or something like that. But he has a graduate's degree, and I don't even know what his degrees are in, honestly. But I've corresponded with Dave over through emails, and we've talked about the subject of Sasquatch, and mostly, and he seems like a very nice guy. I mean, from the correspondence that we had, I would deduce that he's a, a really nice person. You know, so anyway, that's the impression I have of him. Uh, anyway, he's very thorough. Even the stuff that we were talking about when he was asking me things, he was extremely thorough, and I could tell he had an investigative background, and that's what's helped him so far along the way with this stuff. Um, the thing about these cases, okay, now the now what happened with Dave? What got him started with this to begin with? David was in I can't remember what national park it was, somewhere out west, I believe. But anyhow, he had been over there for something unrelated to this completely, and he already had a few books out on the subject of Bigfoot, and he's a very well known researcher in the Bigfoot field, Sasquatch research field, and he was very hands on with the Sasquatch human genome project, or whatever it was that they did with the DNA and everything, and it's a very interesting study. So if any of you guys want to go and check that out, I encourage you to read it because it is extremely convincing if you look at it, you know, with an open mind and everything, like you should everything anyway, in my opinion. But anyhow, let's get back to this. These guys knew who he was. I'm pretty sure. He has stated. I've heard him say this, tell this story in interviews. I'm pretty sure that these guys knew who he was, and he um, said that he knew he was being followed by them that day in the park when he got back to the hotel later on that day. I think it was that evening, he heard a knock at the door, and it was these two rangers who had been following him around the park. All right, they both said that they knew who he was, I'm pretty sure, and they, because of his research, he was an investigative author, so already, so I'm pretty sure they knew that. I mean, knew him because of that. Well, he was approached by them, and they said, we've got these missing persons cases that are just very strange, and they happen in not just here, but in the other parks that we've worked at, um, in the country, all over the country. So they happen all over the place. And he said, we would like for you to take a look at it and see what you can find out. And that's really all that he ever did with them, like as far as correspondence goes. I think, I don't know that he ever really talked to them much, but after he started looking into this, he started finding certain things that connected these cases, and these were these profile points. Each one of these cases matched this certain profile point. Okay, so matched. Well, it had, I can't remember how many of the profile points. It doesn't have to have all of them, but they're all very common among these cases. And there's four exclusionary factors. Okay, one being mental illness, the other one being, or another one being voluntary disappearance, um, criminal acts and or activities, and animal predation. Okay, those are the things that completely rule out whether it's a missing 411 case or not. All right, now the missing 411. Okay, what's happening is something is taking people. Basically, is what it seems like. Okay, um, like apparently that's what's happening. Uh, it's not anything that anyone can confirm though, because it's absolutely like, okay, let me explain. Nobody ever sees these people disappear. No one hears anything, or I mean, rarely do they hear anything. There are some cases where some kind of auditory thing was going on, but rarely does anyone hear anything. Um, I mean, there's no way to know what's happening. Okay, that's the bottom line, and that's what's so intriguing about these cases. We cannot figure out. Nobody can figure out what's happening to these people. All right. Well, you've got David who got on this, started researching this hardcore, going through files and files and files of missing people, particularly ones that went missing in rural areas or national parks and national forests and stuff like that. Um, the the thing is, there was very limited information, and he couldn't find any lists of missing people that the Park Service was keeping. They said that the lists do not exist because he filed like Freedom of Information Acts to acquire these lists of missing people. And he even went so far as to find out he could do like an author's exemption to be able to get them to create a list like free of charge or something. And they said, made up some reason that he didn't qualify, like his books weren't in enough libraries or something like that. Anyhow, it was basically what they were trying to do is keep him away from it. It seemed like, to not produce such a list, because they told him they would do it for, I think it would cost him somewhere around like 38 grand, 32,000, 34,000, something like that, just for a list of the missing people in Yosemite. And that is by far the biggest cluster. And I'll explain these geographical clusters in a second. But that is by far the biggest cluster of missing people. More people go missing in that park than any of the other ones, um, probably combined. Just for Yosemite, it was going to be 32 grand. They said that if he wanted a list compiled from the whole National Park Service, it was going to cost him $1.4 million to get that list, and or for them to make that list. And that's just outrageous. I mean, that's basically just them throwing some astronomical figure out there that they don't think he's going to pay to do it. And I've heard him state that, people have suggested, and I thought this too when I actually heard him saying this in interviews. I've listened to a lot of his interviews in the past, and I've heard him talk about this stuff a lot. And he said that one time he said that someone had suggested he do like a Kickstarter because he did that for his movies, the Missing 411 movies, which are very good. I highly recommend watching those if you haven't. Anyhow, he did that for those and got funding for that. So he was, I mean, he's getting, uh, funding, crowdfunding anyway. So these people were like, well, why don't we just start this to get the 1.4 million up to have the list produced? And it's very interesting that, I mean, something like that could happen and they'd be forced to do it, I'm sure. I mean, if he actually paid the money, the sum that they agreed to, and they didn't, I mean, who knows what they do. But anyhow, I thought that was a pretty good idea, though. And I had actually thought about that. I was like, well, he could go and get a GoFundMe going or something like that and get this money up for this list. And there's enough people that love this, his work, that would probably do it. I mean, it could probably happen realistically. So, I don't know. But anyway, let's get back to this. Okay. Now, the disappearances are unexplainable. No one knows what's happening. And these profile points, we talked about the four exclusionary factors. The profile points, okay, of a missing 411 case are a point of separation. That is where where the victim is separated from the group. Okay, the group could be of two people up to 20 people, who knows? But it's typically the last person or the first person if they're further ahead of the majority of the group. It always happens when they separate themselves, put a little distance in between themselves and the next person. So that always seems to happen. And I mean, that's almost in every single case. They separate themselves from the group. Um, the time of day, okay, the time of the disappearance. It typically happens in like the afternoon to early evening hours, uh, from 2 p.m. to 6 or 7 p.m. That's the most common times I've heard. I've heard David say that. Uh, boulder fields. Okay, that's another profile point. Boulder fields are interesting because, and I'll explain a little more about this later. Now, the boulder fields, though, specifically granite. Okay, granite seems to have some kind of, I don't know, some kind of force, energy that a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people talk about. Anyway, just hearing it, I guess, through the stuff I've listened to, but I've heard granite brought up. when people are talking about like holistic stuff and things like that and energies and things. I've heard a lot of it then. Well, a lot of these people are found or go missing near boulder fields, specifically granite boulder fields. There's usually lots of boulders everywhere, big boulders. And a lot of the time, that's where their bodies are found. Uh, Either that or near water. Usually, there's always water associated somewhere in this stuff. Though a lot of the people are found, when they're found, a lot of them are found in creeks and small streams and rivers and things like that. Not very deep, not deep enough for people to be drowning in. And they're usually found, like the men are usually found, I think it's face down and or face up, whatever it is, opposite of what of the way a man is typically found when he drowns. And I want to say it's face down. Um, they're all found like face down instead of face up. Women are usually found face down. I think men are usually face up. I could be getting that mixed up. I'm not an expert on that. Anyhow, everything I tell you guys pretty much is just regurgitated information with my opinions just sprinkled in there every now and then. I hope that gets me by until I start the guests coming on. The guests are coming soon, though, for real. I've got that lined up. Anyway, so the water, though, there's something about the water. The other thing that's weird about this, okay, this happens with clusters. And the geographical clusters are another profile point. And what those are is there's clusters where it can be three up to 70 or 80 people, 100 people, that go missing within like a 50-mile radius or something of a certain spot. And there'll be like so many of them that go missing in these, and that's why Yosemite is like a cluster in itself. I mean, there's just multitudes of clusters there. People go missing left and right at Yosemite for some reason. There's a lot of granite at Yosemite though, a lot of rock. So anyhow, it's really I mean, it's really disconcerting, like hearing this stuff. It's disturbing stuff to hear because you cannot rationalize it, and that's what makes it so creepy. Well, anyway, let's go back to the profile points. All right, we talked about boulder fields near water. Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say though. Also, these clusters, okay, happen near the coast, the west coast, the east coast. Okay, you'll have the clusters that don't go too far inland. Like we're talking about probably 2 or 3 states over from the coast. Okay, and you have the middle of the country that hardly has any disappearances at all. I mean, I don't even know if they have any. But then you get up toward the Great Lakes, and Florida is just a, mega crazy place. Also, I don't even think Dave looks at cases in Florida, honestly, because there's so many disappearances there. I've heard him say that, I know. I don't know if he still does that, but there's no way. I mean, I know that there's a lot in Florida. A lot happens. There's a lot of water in Florida. But anyway, um, let's see. The water though, that is weird that it happens near coast, near coasts, the west coast, the east coast, and especially up along the AT. I don't know about the PCT and whatever the other trail is there. Um, but I know the AT has a lot of disappearances, and a lot of them are missing 411 disappearances. Uh, anyway, now We talked about the near the water, weather events. There seems to always be a weather event that hinders the search, and it happens either right when or right after they go missing, almost like it's done on purpose to hinder, any effort to find people. It's strange, and it can range from, I've heard David say, it can range from a dust storm to a blizzard, and anything in between, tornadoes, hurricanes. I guess I don't know about hurricanes. I don't know if it's that widespread, but um, big storms, thunderstorms, and things like that. So I know that that can happen. And that's weird because it is like when you look at these cases, almost all of them have a severe weather event that occurs. Either a lot of snow or a big old like thunderstorm coming through, raging. You know, I mean, there's crazy stuff that happens, and with the weather, and when you look at these cases, you see that it's very relevant. So, and that's how Dave, established all this, like these profile points. He established it by going through these cases, seeing all these similarities that are just undeniable. And so many of them share these profile points, and certain ones are more prominent than others. Um, this one is very weird, though. The next one I'm going to talk about, which is missing clothing. Oftentimes, the victims are found missing clothing, specifically their shoes. Um, I know that I looked into a lot of these cases about this stuff, and that is true. The shoe thing is weird. Usually, if the person is not found, sometimes they will find their clothing, and they'll just find random articles of clothing usually. Sometimes it'll be a single shoe, sometimes it'll be both shoes, and usually they're in pristine condition. They don't look like they've been walking through the woods with them. They don't look, like they've been weathered and faded and gnarly from animals chewing on them, and nothing like that. They look pristine, like they were the day that they left with them. It's weird. The shoe thing is really strange. And a lot of the time, though, they're missing a lot of clothing. I mean, sometimes they're found straight up, just, bare butt naked. And it's weird because, well, there was one of the cases, I can't remember the name, if I ever knew it, honestly. But I know it wasn't a recent case or anything. I want to say it may have happened like in the 50s or something. Um, Maybe not the 50s. I don't know. But it could have been the 70s. Anyway, it was a scout, Boy Scout, who went missing. Just like he was hiking through with his troop, I guess, and he went missing, just disappeared. And they found him, I think, a couple days later, like a few miles from where he went missing. And he was like laid beside a trail, dead and deceased. And he, his pants were like down around his knees, and that's all he had on. And his clothes were folded neatly and stacked, placed neatly on a rock in the middle of the river that was probably 150 feet away from where he was laying. Now, tell me that's not weird. I mean, this is documented fact that they found this like this. And his shoes, I think, were laying right beside it on the rock. So I don't know what to make of it. I mean, but that's the kind of stuff that'll happen. They'll be missing articles of clothing. And oftentimes their clothing will be found even when they're not. Um, it's weird, but more often than not, though, I think it is that people just disappear without a trace. Uh, they don't ever recover any of their items. Nothing happens. It's really, really strange. So let's get to the next one, which is another one that's very strange. Now, these are probably not the order they would list them in. I don't know. But anyway, dogs won't or can't search or track the people. They can't find a scent, or they won't. Like they're spooked, like they get scared, like they don't want to go and track the scent. And these dogs live for this. I mean, they were bred from small puppies to want to go and do that. That's what they live for. That's their purpose, is to track, to find a scent and go to it. And it's like their behavior is just super bizarre. Like when they start going up to, they'll go up to a trailhead where someone went missing, and I've heard some of the dogs have like gone up there and just gone to the trailhead, walked around in a couple circles, and laid down, would not, like refused, like locked up and would not go down the trail, wouldn't search. And I mean, they live to do this. This is what they want to do. So it's really weird. All right. Unknown causes of death. That's another thing. They can't figure out what kills people. They often will just put, because of weather circumstances, and they'll find their clothes shed, somewhere or something. They'll assume it was hypothermia or something like that that gets them. And they'll just presume that and put it down just to have something there, basically. But they really have no actual idea of what's going on. Now, they sometimes will put unknown, can't be determined, or something like that. And a lot of the time you can read the coroner's notes or whatever, medical examiner's notes from autopsies when they occur on them. You can read what they write about it. A lot of the time they'll rationalize what they say by saying, that, well, given the circumstances that they were found in and this and that, it could indicate that the most likely indication is, and that's what they'll base their determination on. But more often than not, they won't know for sure what happened, but they'll put something anyway. That's just how it goes. They don't want to look stupid, like they can't figure it out or something like that. A lot of ego gets in the way, I've seen, or from what I hear, when it comes to this kind of stuff. On all sides of things, I think. But anyway, another one is the victims are often disabled or have an illness. Either, and it's not always obvious. Could be something subliminal. I mean, they don't always have something just apparently wrong with them, but you'll find out later that they did, like they were hard of hearing and nobody knew it, or something like that. Things like that will come out. It's weird though, because they do. And now it's been found too that it's either a disability or illness, and or someone of really high intelligence. That's another thing that's been found, that has been really common. And we're talking about high levels of intelligence. People who are like physicists and doctors and things like that, they they tend to go missing more than others. It's weird. So anyway, yeah. So those. Let's see. Another one. I already talked about the geographic clustering. Um, the Another ones that are often found when the bodies are found, they're found in places that were previously searched. Like they'll have searched a place 12 times and they'll go back the next day and the body's laying right there where you couldn't have missed it. So a lot of the time when they find the bodies, that's how they find them. And you know, they they sometimes find people alive. It's not unfortunately it's not common. It's much more common to find them deceased, but they do sometimes find people that are still alive. And when they find them alive, a lot of the time they're found unconscious or just incoherent or something, I mean, there's something weird about it. And they also can't recall what happened. Like, there's one of the most well known cases that David will talk about in interviews I've heard. He says there was a guy who, I want to say he was like a doctor or something, who went missing on a ski trip up in like, I really can't even remember where, but I want to say it may have been like Oregon or somewhere, at a resort up there. And he wanted to get like one more run in before lunch. And so his buddies went ahead and went to go eat, and he went back up the mountain. And that was the last time anybody had ever saw him for 2 years. And then one day he calls his wife, I think it is, 2 years later. And he's at the San Diego airport, like 3,500 miles from where he went missing. And he had had a haircut and he was still wearing like ski gear, I think. I want to say his pants and stuff. Yeah, it's weird. Had no recollection of where he had been for the last 2 years. He couldn't tell anybody anything about it. He had no clue. Now tell me how weird that is. I mean, what? Where was this dude for 2 years? I mean, he went missing at a ski resort, winds up at San Diego airport with the worst case of amnesia that anyone's ever had. And no one can account for where he was. They can't find any records of him being anywhere for those 2 years. I mean, it's strange. That's the thing. Like it checks out. He wasn't really anywhere for 2 years. I don't know, but yeah, that's just one of the really weird cases. Now, ones that are like unsolved, you've got some that are really old cases that have, yet to be solved. And this is one actually that my mom did a report on. She's from Knoxville, Tennessee, and she did a report. She and her best friend did a report on this for, I think, when they were like seniors for some class. And they did a report on Dennis Martin. Now, the Dennis Martin disappearance was a high profile disappearance. I want to say he was a 2-year-old, I think, or 4-year-old maybe. So, I mean, he was young, 3-year-old, somewhere in that age bracket. Anyhow, yeah, he disappeared, and what was weird is like his dad, he disappeared in the Smoky Mountains, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park at Spence Field. Spence Field has the Appalachian Trail, runs like right by it. And, you know, the thing is, they had met a family up there, and this family's last name happened to be Martin also. So they started playing together because they had kids that were actually around the same age. I think they may have had the same number of kids, and they were all around the same ages. So they were playing together in the field, and I think they were playing like hide and seek or something like that. And Dennis's dad had eyes on him. He watched him go behind like a bush or just some like shrubbery right on the wood line right at the edge of the field. And he was, I mean, like the all the kids, I think they said, they called him in to eat or something, and all the kids came out except for Dennis. And his dad was like, I saw him right. He just went right there, and nobody heard anything or saw anything or did. I mean, it was weird. He was just gone, and his dad, who it said was in really good shape, took off in a dead sprint down the AT for like 2 miles, just calling his name, and did not ever see anything. He remains missing to this day. Um, that's a weird case. Okay. The thing is, like, the Green Berets showed up when the search, happened for him. And I've heard, uh, I mean, you can read this, in places. Google it or whatever. The Green Berets don't handle missing persons cases, period. So what were they doing there? Um, the FBI showed up. That's another thing. They don't handle missing persons cases. So, and why would the FBI show up on some of these cases? That's not the only one. But, I mean, they don't show up on all of them, but some of the really weird ones they do. And that's another just weird thing in itself. But, what happened that made them all so interested? Um, this is another thing about that disappearance. There was another family called the Key family. Was their last name was Key, and they had asked a ranger, I think, where they could go to have the best chance of seeing some bears. Um, there's black bears, all over the Smokies, and I think they, told them there was a place on the Loop Road over on Cades Cove or something where there was a lot of wildlife, and they had a good chance of seeing something there. And so they went there, I think, or something, and they were, well, I've heard two versions. I've heard they did and didn't hear a scream, but they may or may not have heard a scream and saw what looked like what they described as a wild man covered in hair carrying something over his shoulder, and it stepped off real quick into the woods. They thought it was a bear, I think, or something at first, and didn't really think much of it. But then they found out that Dennis went missing not too far from there, and they were like, I wonder if that was any relation to, this happening. So they actually went back down to the park and told the rangers and stuff and showed them the spot where they were at and took them there and told them what happened and everything. So, anyway, well, let's fast forward to now. All right. I was watching an interview with some guy who I guess was maybe some kind of historian for the Smokies or something. I don't know. But anyway, this old guy. And this interview, the first one I watched was, I think, like back from the 80s or something. He told a story about like what I just told you guys, almost word for word. Well, I watched this interview that was much later, It's a much more recent interview. I want to say it was from like 2015, maybe. And anyway, this same guy, same old guy, tells a completely different story. He says that they witnessed a man carrying a little boy over his shoulder, getting in a van and driving off. Or maybe not a little boy, maybe just carrying something over his shoulder. I want to say maybe he said it was a little boy, though. I mean, for real. The story changed drastically. There was a lot of comments that said, once Dave Paulides started putting out his 411 books, they changed a lot of that Dennis Martin story or something when people were interviewed about it since then. I don't know. That's just what I'd seen written by some people, a few people actually. But who knows? I did think that was strange though that the story changed like that because I mean it was very different. Never in any version, and that's another reason I said that about my mom doing that report back when she was in high school. Um, was because I told her about that, about seeing that interview with that guy and everything, and she was like, "Oh my gosh," or no, I've never heard that. No one's ever said that. I was like, "Yeah, I know. I've never heard that either, and I do not believe that whatsoever." So I don't know why they're. I mean, they were just trying to put it out there. It's almost like they're just doing everything they can to keep whoever they can from gaining interest. You know, I don't know. It's weird, man. It's some weird stuff. But the Dennis Martin case was strange. And I remember my mom telling me, that they did everything to try to find that boy. I mean, they even had psychics come in, and this was back in the day, like, the 60s and stuff when, that stuff really wasn't like well accepted kind of thing. But they actually did. They had psychics come in and talk. Um, you know, I mean, like, I guess tell them where, uh, they were seeing him and stuff. And like one of them, my mom remembered one of them saying that, yeah, his he was in a log, like his body was in a hollowed out log or something. And she said they ran with that for, a few months, like 6 months, looking through hollowed logs. And I mean, they did everything literally to try to find this kid. Never ever have found him, but they did, I think, find some clothing of his. I think they found a jacket or something, or shirt or pants, maybe something like that. That was his. Some hikers, I think, came across it, and I think it was near the area where the Key family saw that day. So I don't know. I can't remember for sure where that was. I know it was weird because it was a higher elevation than where he was. Um, it was like I can't remember how much higher up, but in order to get the clothes there, he would have had to have gone uphill. And that's another weird thing about this stuff. The kids will go missing, and they'll be miles from where they were last seen. I'm talking like 10, 11 miles sometimes. Ain't no 2 year old, 3 year old getting 10 or 11 miles in, a day or 36 hours or something like that. That's not happening. Not happening. Uh, that's another weird thing, but it will be, they will find, oops, they will find them though, that way, uh, that far away. I mean, it's just insane, honestly, how they get there. I mean, there's no there's no explanation that we know of. But, there's theories, and that's what people have mostly with all this stuff. And a lot of the theories are, portals and people stumbling into them and not knowing it, not realizing it. And there's a lot of cases where that's happened. And I think I might just do a whole a whole show on that though, because there's so many of these cases we could discuss about people wandering into portals and what they see and stuff in there. A lot of it's crazy, and I might mention a little bit of it though here in a minute when I talk about what might be happening. But I could talk for so long about this stuff. I might have to do a second part to this one, but anyway, there's so many cases. I mean, there's the one of the craziest ones though, and it just so happened to have just so happened to have happened in in the crazy mountains in Montana. Now, that case, Aaron Hedges is the guy's name. He was 37, I think, 38 years old, something like that. And he and his buddies were going into the mountains to hunt for like a week or something, or maybe a weekend. I think it was a week though. They were like really packed up and they had horses, and Aaron was not on horseback. He was walking. Well, I think like, okay, when they got there, they parked the trailer, got the horses out, and I think they had like a pack mule too. And something happened with the mule, got spooked and caused a horse wreck on the trail. Well, a lot of the supplies got lost. I think Aaron had lost his sleeping bag or something. So when they, gathered everything up and went on to the camp, one of the guys, his buddies, had a cache with supplies up by this other lake or something, not too far of a hike. Well, Aaron, and he was like an experienced outdoorsman, hunter and everything. He walked up there, or was gonna walk up there and get the stuff. Well, he ends up like going off trail, and they try to get him on his walkie-talkie, and they can't, get him. But it's a GPS walkie-talkie, so it does give them, global positioning, and that's how they see where he was off trail. But then I think it, goes dead or whatever, and they don't get anything else. Well, anyway, this happened in 2014. Okay. And he just went missing. They couldn't ever locate him. There ended up being a snowstorm that hindered the search greatly. There was like 2 feet of snow on the ground. And it also made it seem impossible that he could have been mobile during that time. But after the storm, they searched and searched, didn't find anything. And then in an area they had literally just searched like the day before, they went back to it and found his boots laid just set perfectly side by side. And they found a half burnt cigarette in the fire pit. Uh, there was a fire pit there. I guess it was a little campsite or something. And there was a half burnt cigarette in the pit, and it was the brand he smoked. And there was a Camelback water like reservoir thing, and there was also the strap, the waist strap from a backpack that had been cut off. They couldn't figure out what that was about. But anyway, they started thinking hypothermia. Well, maybe he cut that off to put his hands in it to keep them warm or something, and who knows. But it's unlikely that he would have survived out there with any of the stuff he had had, really. I mean, in that snowstorm. It's an unlikely event. And if he was hypothermic, I just couldn't see someone being hypothermic and being able to do the things that he did and get as far as he got. That's the weird stuff. Like, okay, like when his boots were found. But I think it was a year later. Yeah, they found his his backpack, and his backpack was like I wonder if I wrote it down actually. I can't remember how far away his backpack was from where they found his boots. I want to say it was like 6 miles or something like that. Some ridiculous um amount, distance. But anyway, it was found the people who were uh the people who owned the property where his backpack was found. Their name last name was Ryan, and they have a ranch down there that you can see like from the mountains, like from the hills and stuff. And there was the backpack sitting leaned up like on a tree, like someone had placed it there with his bow, I think, like right beside it, and his vest, like his hunting vest, um, laid out right beside it too, nicely laid out, neatly. And someone, they said someone put it there for somebody to find. Well, anyway, like, so they found that stuff and it was his. It had his gun in there, had like protein bars, like stuff he could have eaten, had all kinds of stuff, to survive. His backpack did. So, I mean, and him being an experienced outdoorsman, very experienced, especially with this area. Like they said, his buddies said he went up there every other weekend. So, but anyway, like, being that experienced, you would think, he's not going to be in any trouble out there, especially having supplies, some supplies like that. He's not going to wander off trail if he knows where he's at. There's a lot of weird things with this. Well, anyway, um, after that incident, or after the backpack was found, um, the sheriffs had found I think this happened before the backpack was found, but right up the hill from where it was found, they found a thermos, and it was sitting on a stump with the cup of the thermos out and an open energy drink, like someone poured it and started drinking it. And the ranch that the backpack was found at was directly in view of where that was found, that stump was. So that's another weird thing. Well, a year after the backpack was found, that was 2015, like almost exactly a year after it was found, they find his remains. They find a skull and I think his pelvis and a femur or something like that. Uh, anyway, they found his remains and they identified that it was him. And his remains were found 11 miles from the camp where he was when he was last seen. So you tell me how someone hypothermic made it 11 miles somewhere. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that doesn't make sense. As if any of the other stuff makes any sense either. The stuff that happened. I mean, it's just really weird stuff. His death is still a mystery to this day. And that's the thing, like, and they also couldn't retrieve any information off of his cell phone. I mean, everything was unretrievable. So, and I mean, that's the thing too. He had his cell phone with him. Why didn't he use it? I think he had service. I think it pinged him or something. Um, yeah, why didn't he use it? He had a GPS walkie-talkie. Why didn't he use it? I mean, there's a reason, I am sure. So, I've talked for a long time about this stuff already, I know. I can feel it. Anyway, I want to mention this, though. there's a guy named Alex. No, I think it's Alan Lammers. Yeah, Lamers. Um, this guy, this is weird because he was setting up radio stations in Bali, I think, or Indonesia or something like that too. He was on the island of Sulawesi, and he was down there working. He's like Canadian, I think. Seems like a real smart guy from the interview I heard, but he's down there setting up primitive like or radio stations in very primitive rural tribal areas, villages, uh, to for like political broadcasting reasons or something. Usually it's done for protest or something like that. But anyhow, he specializes in helping get these things set up. So this guy was setting these up with this company he's working for down there in Indonesia. And he was going to this, rural tribe in the jungle or whatever, and remote spot, that they lived in, village, a little small village. And he bought like a yellow raincoat, he said. Well, one of the guys told him, no, man, no, you don't wear, stuff like that. You only wear black and white around these people and stuff. And they were like, well, what do you mean? He was like, what do you mean? They were like, well, no, out in the jungle, you don't wear colors like that because he was like, well, why not? And he said, you'll disappear. And he thought, they were joking around. Well, out of respect for their culture, he didn't, he discarded the yellow raincoat and got like a black one. And he said he packed all black just, to make sure, he did everything right. So, anyway, he said they got to the village and they would have to scout out a water source, like moving water, basically, to set up the power. And he said, in turn, they would, get the power going for the radio station. And in turn, the village would also have a little electricity, which most of them typically did not have at all. So it, worked out good for these people most of the time having this. And anyway, he said that they went out to the jungle. Well, he, said they were out there, found the water source and everything and looked it over. And on their way back, he noticed that one of his friends one of the guys he worked with or whatever, had on yellow socks. And he said, he didn't, say anything about it, didn't draw any attention to it or anything. Well, he said, they got back that night, and after they ate or something, the guy started like projectile vomiting, like big time. Like it sounded like exorcist style. Like he said he had never seen anything like this. He said the guy was throwing up like vomiting like 5 feet, like a distance of like 5 feet projectile. I mean, it sounded crazy. He said he'd never seen someone so sick in their life. And he said they were afraid that he was going to die, so they stayed up with him all night, keeping him hydrated, making sure he stayed breathing and alive and whatnot. Well, he got so sick that um, they really were worried that something bad was happening. They thought, well, maybe he's got malaria or something like that. Well, the next day, uh, he just makes a full recovery and he's totally fine. Like nothing was ever wrong with him. And they were like, man, what happened? He said, well, I didn't want to say anything, but I forgot and I wore yellow socks out to the jungle yesterday. And he said something grabbed my leg and bit me. And he said that he had marks on his leg. He said, though it didn't look like a bite, really. He said it was like kind of crescent shaped marks, and there were three of them in a row, I guess, like three marks. And he said there were two places with three marks in each spot. Well, these marks, I guess, he said it looked more like claw marks than a bite or something, but the guy didn't see anything. He just felt it, he said, and he could tell, it was like a grabbing, grasping type feeling, and that's why he thought it was a bite or something. And he had no idea what it was because he literally didn't see anything. So anyway, they end up saying that he was lucky because people usually disappear and don't come back. They're never found again. So I don't know. That's weird. But anyway, um, let me think. Yeah. So he said that he asked the guy what it was that takes these people, and they said it's the Kakashi, Kakashi, or something is what they call it. The jinn, also, which is it's actually I think like a Muslim term for like demon. I guess it's a way of saying that, or something malicious. It's also a term for gypsy, I think. I want to say that they said that that was one of the interpretations. But so the Kakashi is what they call them down there, and that translates, I think, to like little person or something like that. So anyway, they it's such a prevalent thing down there that cultures have villages have shaped their whole culture around this um, this occurrence. He said the way that Alan put it is he actually like he said they kind of accept it as it's something that happens every now and then, and he said they just go on, about their lives and are kind of resigned to it. It's just what happens down there, I guess. Sometimes people disappear with no trace. So anyway, they say though that if you wear colors like that, you're much more likely to be taken. So that's why they don't wear any bright colors whatsoever. They wear nothing but like black, and most of the villages don't even wear white at all. Like the one he said he was at, they wore a little bit of white. Some of them would wear it, but he said everybody going out in the jungle wore nothing but black. So it's it sounds crazy. I mean, in these villages, they they don't wear anything but black. Everyone in the village. That's how much these people uh, know this. It's really weird. So anyway, I'm not gonna really talk about the next thing because it would take a long time. But Alan Lammers is the guy, and I'll tell you guys about it on the next show because I know I've been on this one a while. But anyway, Alan Lammers is the guy, and if you want to watch the interview or listen to the interview, um, it was with Whitley Strieber on Dreamland. I know, pretty sure. But you can just type in Alan Lammers interview, and I'm sure that'll come up, and that's the one to listen to. It's very, very interesting. And if it's true, it very well be possible. My next episode, I think I have a good idea of what I'm going to do it on, and I can carry this over into it because this has taken me a while, and I still have so much more I could say about this stuff. But anyway, I'm going to save that. So, anyhow, I'll be back with you guys really soon. I'm going to try to get my frequency back up with my shows and do at least 2 a week. I'd like to do 3 a week, but realistically, anyway, I hope I can do more than that. But anyhow, I really appreciate all you guys watching and listening, and I'll be back with you guys really soon. So everybody stay safe and have a really good week and a safe holiday. Well, you probably won't see this by the time the holiday will probably be over. So don't worry about that last part. Anyway, thanks everybody.